Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up on Dialogue, what has Idaho done to help its disabled population and what still needs to be accomplished? We talk with an advocate for the disabled who's been asked to run a national disability rights organization and a parent of a child with disabilities. That's Dialogue next. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. A welcome as well to those of you listening on public radio and the World Wide Web. More than 40% of Idaho families include at least one person with a disability. But if you think about it, as we age, most of us will require assistance with our mental or physical needs. Today we'll discuss what's currently in place to help the disabled in Idaho, how cuts in Medicaid services might affect this population, and what money might be coming from the federal stimulus for programs for the disabled. Now, one person who's been advocating for the disabled in Idaho for more than 20 years is Kelly Buckland. Mr. Buckland, who was paralyzed at age 15 in a diving accident, is a social worker by training. Since 1995, he's run the State Independent Living Council, or SILC. Mr. Buckland is leaving Idaho to lead the National Council for Independent Living, which identifies itself as the longest-running national grassroots organization run by and for people with all types of disabilities. Mr. Buckland is the recipient of numerous honors, including the Hewlett-Packard Human Rights Leadership Award and the President's Medallion from the University of Idaho. He's also been inducted into the National Spinal Cord Injury Association Hall of Fame. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Marcia. It's good to be here.
My other guest, Angela Lindig, has had to learn how to navigate the system of services for the disabled because she has a daughter with disabilities. She's the current chair of the State Independent Living Council and the originator of an innovative project we'll show you later in the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now, are you disabled, or do you know someone who is and needs some more information on accessing services? Do you have an opinion on the recent cuts in Medicaid programs for the disabled? Give us a call at 1-800-973-9800. Well, first of all, Kelly, congratulations.
Thanks, Marcia.
It must be hard to leave Idaho after all the work that you've put into services for the disabled here.
It is. It's going to be really hard to leave. A lot of my friends and people that I've worked with real closely, the staff at the SILC, I got a great staff that works for me, and the council members are great to work for. So,
could you tell us a little bit about the organization that you're going to lead?
It's the National Council on Independent Living, and essentially it's the work is a lot like the State Independent Living Council, except it's on a national level, obviously, and working with Congress instead of the state legislature. But most of the work will be very similar. We'll be working on disability rights stuff as well as services for people. So it won't be totally new field to me, but it should be a whole different level and
But
scale.
as I understand it, there's across the country, you will now be working with 600 centers for independent living and another 56 state independent living councils. So quite a broad group of people.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the introduction, the group that you're going to work with works across disabilities. And before we begin, I'd like to kind of talk about that. What do we mean when we talk about disability? It's not just people who, say, are in a wheelchair like yourself.
Right. The independent living movement really tries to address cross-disability issues. The belief within the independent living movement is that the things that are similar with us are greater than the things that are different.
So we could be talking about cognitive disability. We could be talking about
sensory disability like blindness or deafness, or mental illness, any kind of disability. And like I said, the belief is that there's more commonality, which is the discrimination and that sort of stuff that people deal with. So
people tend to think maybe of disability as just the placard that they see in the cars for the wheelchair, but it's much broader than that.
Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, the disability rights movement sort of is defined by parking places and bathrooms, but it's a lot larger than that. So.
Well, Angela, you must be sad to see Kelly go as well.
I am very sad. I'm happy for him, though. I think on a national level, you know, he'll be able to do the things that he's done in Idaho for so many more people. So Washington's lucky to have him.
Well, one issue that Silk and other advocacy groups will continue to work on even after Kelly leaves is this issue of the state cutting Medicaid services for the disabled. That those services, hours have been cut basically.
Correct.
For aides, and like your daughter has. And before we talk about this, let's listen to Governor Otter talking to our reporter Ton Tan on Idaho Reports about these cuts.
I understand how difficult those cuts are, and I understand the impact that has on the families. But I don't want to get to a point a year from now where I have to cut 30 hours. So if I cut the 8 hours now, if we make the adjustment now, and get rid of some of the other nice things that aren't necessary, then I think 8 hours, I pray that 8 hours is all we're going to have to reduce for those children.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there. First of all, he's saying if we cut now, we won't have to cut more later, and that 8 hours is not that much.
Right. And to clarify, he's talking, those 8 hours are for developmental disability therapy services, in particular for children. So my daughter did qualify for 30 hours a week, and now it's 22 hours a week of developmental therapy services. And I actually don't see that as some of the nice things. I think it's the necessary things. And so cutting 8 hours for some families is going to mean that they are going to have to look towards other means to survive.
And here we see your daughter working with her tech.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the things that these aides do that, for instance, a parent or a grandparent couldn't do? And why do you need assistance? Why can't you do it?
It's a lot of work, and you have families and you have other children, but in particular what they're working on with Amber is her daily living skills, taking her out into the community and teaching her many of the things that we couldn't do 30 hours a week or 22 hours a week, as the case may be. Might not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about teaching her to feed herself or walk or social skills or just being around typical peers and interacting socially, that's worth everything.
Kelly, what's your reaction to what Governor Otter said about the number of hours, and he hopes that if he cuts now he won't have to cut more, and also that some of the nice things maybe could be cut out?
Well, my reaction is pretty much the same as Angela's. It's not that they're nice things; they really are necessary things. And if the people who need it the most are the ones who need the most hours, so by cutting off the 8 hours from 30 to 22, what it does is the families who need those services the worst are actually the ones that are going to do without it.
So you've said maybe that somebody might have to stop working.
Yep, that could definitely cause a parent to have to lose their job, quit their job, stay home, and that certainly doesn't help the economy.
Now, some might say, everybody's taking their lumps now. This recession, lots of programs are being cut. So shouldn't programs for the disabled also take some cuts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and I think the disability advocates were certainly willing to do that, but we didn't have any input into what got cut. For instance, institutions, for the most part, didn't get any cuts. And the people in the institutions aren't going to have their hours cut. It's the community services that took the biggest hits, which is really what concerned us the most, and which I think we probably hollered about the loudest. It was the community services that help people stay in the communities that was getting cut.
And one more question before we take some phone calls. Again, maybe speaking from somebody who might have a different point of view, why should Medicaid services be available at all to, say, parents of a disabled child who have a decent income?
Because there's a point where the cost of keeping your child in your home, otherwise you're going to end up with your child going back to the institutionalized care. If we don't put the money into these services, then what are our options? And as far as the parent's income, this is about the child's disability, and these programs were put into place to keep children in their homes.
Okay, let's take some phone calls. Jerry in Athol. Jerry, go ahead, please.
Hey, I totally agree with Angela and Kelly. I'm a single dad raising 5 kids. One is autistic, and he is nonverbal and not potty trained at the age of 14. And I've dealt with Medicaid for the past 7 years, and I can't get any help at all. And they keep cutting it back and cutting it back. And I think Butch Otter needs to be fired, because just what Angela says, it's so hard to raise these kids. We don't have the resources, the medication, we're just falling so far behind. And maybe instead of having Butch Otter have 5 guys around filling in one pothole in the road, maybe we should fire the 5 guys, put 1 guy out there filling the pothole, and put the resources where it's needed.
Thank you very much. And just one quick question, Jerry. What do they tell you? Why can't they cover your son? What's the reason?
Well, I was trying to work 40 hours a week, and just what Kelly and Angela stated, they said, well, why do you need 50 hours worth of respite care during the summertime when the kids aren't, or the child wasn't in school? I said, well, it's half hour to work, half hour home, and 40 hours a week. Well, we can't do that.
Okay, let's try and get an answer to your question. Thanks so much for calling. And right before we do, let's put up a picture of Spencer, I believe is his name. He is autistic. He was mentioned by the governor in his State of the State address. He kind of apologized to Spencer's mother for having to cut services. I understand she's appealed and won the appeal, and so he is going to continue to receive some of his services. So there's some good news here, but what do we say to folks like Jerry?
Well, there is the ability for families to appeal these cuts, and for
well, he's
for
never
children.
had services. It sounds like he's never been able to get any.
Well, I'm not sure. It could have been that he wasn't able to get what he needed, but
Okay.
was getting.
That's what I
some.
understood. That
Okay.
he just wasn't getting all that
Okay.
he.
So he could appeal.
He could appeal. There's no guarantee that he will still be able to get everything that he needs, but he can appeal through Medicaid. It sounds like he's tried quite a bit as it is.
Is autism treated differently somehow, or?
No, I don't believe it is. I think
Okay.
most people who have kids or adults, quite honestly, are in worse position, because the children can get services under what they call the EPSDT program, which is early screening and periodic testing. And kids are eligible for, and my belief is that's what Spencer was able to get his services under when he appealed. So, but for adults, that program doesn't exist. So.
Okay, great. Well, let's take another call. Dean in Meridian. Dean, go ahead, please.
I have a question about accessibility to public buildings and public facilities. Are you aware of any upcoming plans to improve accessibility for public buildings? And mine was a quick 2-part question. I am also a permanently disabled father and widower of 3 children, and it seems as though that it's obviously not only difficult for me, but for all permanently disabled or all disabled persons to raise their children. But it seems like the amount of money that the state and the federal government provide for the disabled parent to provide for their children, the state takes away the cost of living increase that we get from the Social Security, and it seems to be a vicious cycle. The Fed give us and the state take it.
Okay,
Any input on that?
Great. Let's start with the second question first, because you are a parent who's
Yes, ma'am.
disabled, Kelly, and you have a child.
I have a 10-year-old. His
And-
name's Rodney. Hi, Rodney.
And how do you address that issue? I mean, do you think it is a catch-22?
Well, yeah, that's not just for parents though. The Social Security, what Dean's talking about is every time the feds give people an increase in their Social Security, the state does a supplemental to that, and the state reduces your supplemental every time the feds increase it. So people, even though the feds mean them to be able to have a little more money, it never comes about because the state reduces your supplemental by about the same amount.
Well, it's kind of technical, but would this be an issue that would be on the docket to work on?
Nationally?
Yeah.
I think so. The situation for people living on Social Security, the level of poverty that they live in on Social Security just continues to get worse and worse because it's never kept up with inflation. So
That's correct.
But the parent thing, if I could address that a little bit, because that is one of the things I think Idaho really should be the proudest of, is parenting with a disability in this state. You cannot be discriminated against in child custody matters. It's not addressing the financial issue that Dean brought up, but you cannot be discriminated against as a parent with disability in Idaho, and that's not true in any other state in the country. We're the only state that has protected parents with disabilities from discrimination and in regards to your child custody. So that's one thing where Idaho actually is leading the nation. So,
and unfortunately, we're going to have to take the first part of this question very briefly, but any new trends in accessibility issues?
There is. In fact, there's a bill in the legislature this year. It's House Bill 220, and it just passed the Senate, so it's on its way to the governor. It adopts the 2006 International Building Code for Idaho, and if that code is adopted, Idaho, basically the building code will get us to 99% of compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and Fair Housing Act. So any new buildings that are built will have to really be accessible. So
Great.
That would be a big thing.
Thank you for that update, and thanks for calling. Angela, I want to go back to, we saw pictures of the tech with your daughter,
Right.
and it was at a playground, and we're talking about accessibility issues, so I want to recap that. The playground, which is in Meridian, you and your husband and many others helped raise money for, to the tune of more than $1 million once the city chipped in, and it's totally accessible, universally accessible to both people with disabilities and not, and we have some footage of that. What a labor of love.
Yeah, it's took about 7 years, and we partnered with the city and St. Alphonsus actually, and created Idaho's first universally accessible playground. And it's not just, it's got ramp access to all areas so that somebody with a wheelchair or a walker can get where they need to go, but it's also sensory rich, and there's outdoor musical equipment and water features and rock climbing walls, and just something for absolutely everybody out there.
And we see here the ramp, but it's also designed for parents who may have a disability to interact with their children at the playground too.
Yep, there's nowhere that you can't go. There's nothing that you can't do with your kids. And it's designed so that it does not, there's nothing about Adventure Island that looks like it's got a tag on it that says, oh, this is for people with disabilities. It's designed to be a naturally inclusive environment.
And for people watching who might want to try this in their community, what are your suggestions?
Plan for a lot of time and a lot of grassroots fundraising.
There's the sensory, there's the music.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And actually it is getting easier because more and more communities are going towards universal design for their play places.
Yeah, I wanted to go play when we were filming. Didn't have time though, but looked like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Well, I'm sure it'll be something to be a legacy for you.
Thank you.
Let's take another phone call. Sam in Jerome. Sam, go ahead, please.
Yes, I am disabled, and the state Medicaid says I don't qualify for that because I make too much money from Social Security. And Social Security says I can't get on Medicare for 2 years. Now, somebody in the government needs to rethink what's going on. You know.
Okay, let's talk to Kelly about this. This whole catch-22 of making too much money, I know, is something that you're concerned about.
Yeah, we've been working on legislation to help people go to work and earn more money, and keep their Medicaid. But what he's talking about is not being able to get on Medicaid because your
the
Social
Social
Security
Securities.
check is too much. And then what
So what
where
are,
Medicare is there's a 2-year wait period, and that's there on purpose. There was an actuarial done when they started up Medicare, and they found that people either die, get better, or go back to work within 2 years. So they put this 2-year wait period in place as a money-saving effort, actually. And as long as I can remember, there's a bill introduced in Congress that ends that 2-year wait that he's talking about, and it never goes anywhere. And it's been reintroduced into this Congress, and hopefully it will go somewhere this year, because what this forces people to do is they have to spend themselves into poverty in order to become eligible for Medicaid to get any sort of health care. And you're on that because you've got a disability that requires you to get health care.
so it is a catch-22.
It's a bad thing.
It sounds like something that Kelly will be working on a national level. Thanks so much for calling in, and good luck. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Is it Ria in Teutonia?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes. I was wondering, they passed on February the 19th of 2009, the Children's Health Insurance Program Reauthorization Act of 2009, which should help cover some of these children. When I called about it, they said that our legislature had put a freeze on our Medicaid, and I was wondering what kind of stimulus money
Oh, good question.
should have come in here
Okay,
for this.
thank you very, very much. We're rapidly running out of time, but this is a very important question. What from the stimulus might help? I know Centers for Independent Living are getting a huge amount of money. A lot of money is coming to Medicaid. Where do you see the stimulus money going to plug the gaps?
Well, the Medicaid cuts, what the stimulus money did was stop any further cuts. But the cuts that have been made are going to stay in place, as far as we know anyway, because what's happened with the stimulus money that increases the federal Medicaid match rate, that money's being sent back to the general fund. There's about $50 million in this fiscal year that will go back into the general fund, and about $76 million in Medicaid money that will go back into the general fund next year's budget.
Do you see any of the stimulus money, though, being able to start up some or help in the transportation or the housing area for the disabled?
Yeah, there'll be actually, I think there'll be quite an effect of stimulus money on services for people with disabilities outside of Medicaid. There'll be transportation money. There'll be housing money. There's the centers, as you said, got more money. Our council got some more money in the stimulus package. So did vocational rehabilitation. There's some of the New Freedom Initiative money to help pay for transportation stuff. So I think the stimulus money will help people for sure.
And I want to also mention that the center, the group that you work with here, Silk, has been able to pull in some pretty prominent grants as well. We'll briefly mention some of the important things that you'll be working on with those grants. You've got something going for transportation, for instance.
Right, we recently got an AmeriCorps grant that puts a AmeriCorps member in each Center for Independent Living office. There's 10 of them across the state. And their sole purpose is just to work on increasing transportation for people. So.
And you also mentioned before, but you want people to know about what's called the Medicaid buy-in bill. A lot of people don't know about that, and so some of your grant money will go to education on that.
Yeah, we also got a Medicaid infrastructure grant, which helps work on the Medicaid buy-in program. In Idaho, it's called the Medicaid for Workers with Disabilities program, and a lot of people don't know about that. We're trying to get the word out. That grant will help us do that. But it allows people to go to work or get a promotion or get a raise and still continue to get their Medicaid, which is the services that help them get to work. So.
And when you go to Washington, D.C., Kelly, do you have a priority in mind now that you have a national platform?
Well, I'll be working for a board.
Right, I know that, but I mean...
And they have established some priorities. Our priorities are going to be reauthorization of the Rehabilitation Act. That hasn't been reauthorized in over a decade, and that needs to be done. And then increasing funding for Centers for Independent Living, and then getting the Community Choices Act passed, which, talking about the institutional services versus the community services, that bill would give people a choice. And in a lot of states, people are on waiting lists to be in the community, so that'll be one priority. And then the parenting thing that I talked about that Idaho has done, that's personally one of my goals, to see that happen on a national level so that parents with disabilities can have their rights protected nationally, because you shouldn't have to live in Idaho to be able to have your rights as a parent in place. So.
We're rapidly running out of time, Angela, but as we close, if somebody is listening who's just had a child born with a disability, or maybe they aren't aware of the services, you know, where would you encourage them to go first?
I think the first thing they could do is contact probably the Idaho Care Line would be a good place to start. 211. Right, 211. Or idahochild.org is a good place. They could certainly contact the SILC. We're online.
State Independent Living Council.
State Independent Living Council. Some other resources are health and welfare in their regions, or even I would say Idaho Parents Unlimited is a good place because there are parent training and resource centers in each region.
And what about taking care of your own self as you go through this journey? What have you learned about that? What has helped, you know, for your own kind of emotional?
You know, more than anything, just be involved. Be involved in your community and be a part of your children's journey.
So don't isolate.
No, get involved with other people.
And Kelly, I know that one of the things that's important to you is you feel strongly that this movement is not only about the disabled, that you serve a wider audience, wider constituency than those in a wheelchair or with mental illness.
Yeah, we think that what we do is really good public policy, and that a lot of the stuff that we do actually ends up improving the lives of people who don't have any disabilities. And curb cuts are a good example. It's one people use a lot. In that, if you watch people cross the street now, everybody funnels into the curb cut, and it's good for bicycles and strollers and all kinds of stuff. So it really, what we do really does, I think, lead to better public policy too. So.
Well, for those of you still holding on the line, stay on the line. Our two guests have agreed kindly to answer your questions in our special web extra, which we'll post on the web. You can see there, we're also on Facebook. We've joined the 21st century. I'd like to thank my guests, Kelly Buckland and Angela Lindig. You have been listening to a conversation about disability issues in Idaho. Thanks so much for tuning into Dialogue. We hope you'll join us same time next week or on the web.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web.